On my road to my first 100 subscribers. It really helps me out, and it's free for you to do. I'll be doing a giveaway as well to one of those 100 subscribers. We're going to be giving away a portable Bluetooth speaker that starts as one and can break into two. That way you can almost have like a surround sound sort of feel to it. Make sure you also comment on this video and be active in chat. I really want this to be an active, conversational sort of live stream. That's really my goal of these live streams, is to interact with other fans. Tell me about how bad my takes are. We can have some laughs, make fun of me as much as you want. Talk about whatever topics you want to talk about related to the NFL. But really, this is just a community for us to be able to have fun. Again, talk football and have a good time. So again, we'll wait a little bit for more people to pile in, but I already prompted the chat. Tell me how many sacks you think Micah Parsons will have against the Dallas Cowboys. Is he going to be bringing down Dak multiple times in this game? What do you guys think about that? We'll be going through the slate of games in week 4. Crazy to think that we are already in week 4. Also wanted to talk about another topic, just to start things off, and we'll get into this, but really I wanted to talk about the injuries I've seen around the NFL. I don't know about all of you, but to me it seems like there's a lot of, major impact players that are injured right now. I'll name a few, right? Obviously, Joe Burrow, I think, would be number 1 on that list. That obviously wasn't this past week, but Joe Burrow most likely will be out for most of the season, maybe coming back mid to late December. He's just one of them. We saw this past week 2 major running backs go down. I'm talking about James Conner, who went down for the Arizona Cardinals. James Conner, he's had 2 back-to-back 1,000-yard games this season, the past 2 seasons, and so losing James Conner for the Cardinals is a big deal. They do have Trey Benson. I think Trey Benson will be the one that carries the heaviest load with James Conner going down, but that's really going to impact a team like the Cardinals. We also saw Najee Harris go down, and I feel really bad for Najee Harris. He obviously had, that freak firework accident where it injured his eye, but the Chargers are a really good team, and Najee Harris not being able to be out there on the field, does make the Chargers a little bit less deadly, makes them a little bit less scary. People don't really understand the fact that Najee Harris has been a consecutive 1,000-yard runner since he's been in the NFL. The Steelers did let Najee Harris go, but at the same time, he was a solid running back. They decided they needed to pay other players, and they were banking on the fact that Jaylen Warren was going to have the year that he's so far had. I will say that. But, again, Najee Harris being out, that puts a lot of pressure on a rookie running back in Omarion Hampton. I'm a fan of Omarion Hampton. I think he's going to be able to handle this. But you still have to wonder, as you get later on into the season, if something were to happen to, Omarion Hampton, who's going to be that guy? I was taking a look at it, and it looks to me like they did sign Hassan Haskins, but Hassan Haskins isn't a 3-down back by any means. He's being picked up off the streets, and so losing someone like that, it really does. It really does impact, that Chargers team. We also saw Mike Evans go down with a hamstring injury. I saw some crazy stat. I think it's like 4 consecutive years that Mike Evans has had a hamstring injury. He's also had 1,100 yards consecutively, the past 9 seasons or something like that. So even though he misses games because of hamstring issues, he still is able to have a major impact on that team. But they have a really tough matchup this week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we'll talk about this more as we go on, but the Buccaneers play the Eagles this week. That is not an easy game whatsoever. And when you don't have Mike Evans and also Chris Godwin is still out, that's going to cause some problems. I'm a huge fan of this Buccaneers team. I think Baker Mayfield is proving everyone wrong. I know this is his 3rd year with the Buccaneers, so this isn't something new, but you could really tell that he's taken a leadership role in that locker room. His energy is infectious. I love how he's joking around with rookie Emeka Egbuka. Emeka Egbuka, now that I mention him, we obviously have to say, like, he's really going to have to step up, and he's obviously not even that healthy either. So, Emeka Egbuka being out there, you need him to stay as healthy as possible for this to really work. The last injury I'll talk about is CeeDee Lamb going down. CeeDee Lamb, and we'll obviously talk about this going into, that Sunday game, the Packers versus the Cowboys in Dallas. But, again, to me, CeeDee Lamb going down is what's going to make or break, the Cowboys for a couple of weeks. I think they're expecting him to be out anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, most likely somewhere closer to 4 weeks. And so, again, that's going to have a major impact. So I did want to talk about these injuries because they are starting to pile up in the NFL. Everyone says this. You have 100%, like, there's 100% guarantee you're going to get injured. The level of injury is another aspect of that. But this is a physical game still. I know that they've really softened the game up a lot, but, these injuries are happening. And injuries I'm seeing more often are these Achilles injuries. To me, I believe James Conner had an Achilles injury, and I know Najee Harris has an ankle injury as well. They didn't necessarily specify if it was Achilles or not, or maybe I have it backwards. Maybe it's Najee Harris has the Achilles injury and James Conner just has an ankle injury, but you're seeing a lot of Achilles issues in this game or in this season, and I'm kind of curious about that. Has anyone else noticed the fact that there's just so many injuries happening, especially Achilles injuries happening? Like that's something to me that I feel like it's becoming more and more common. I was listening to the Bussin' with the Boys podcast, and they were actually talking about this issue like last week, and it was interesting what they said, and I think there's some truth to this. These athletes, they're becoming they're becoming bigger, they're becoming faster, and they're becoming stronger. But the parts of the body that are not getting bigger and faster and stronger are your tendons, are your ligaments, like your Achilles, your ACL. These things are not getting stronger as humans become more and more athletic. These players are running faster and faster every year in the 40. They're getting bigger, they're getting stronger. And so you have like these, I would call almost like sports car sorts of bodies, but under the hood, there's still, a Honda or a Toyota engine or like spark plugs. There's aspects of the body that, just haven't been able to progress as much as the rest of their bodies. And so they're getting more wear and tear. That's the only thing I can think of as to why this is happening more and more. Has anyone else, though, noticed this? Has anyone else seen this? Because, again, to me, these Achilles injuries especially are just becoming more and more common. Hamstring as well. Hamstring issues pop up all the time. And those are a finicky injury. You never know when you're going to be fully healed from that. It could be, a week, but it could also be something like, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And you just never really know. And it impacts the season. It impacts these teams. So, again, that's a lot of injuries that I've talked about, right? Again, Najee Harris, James Conner. We're talking about Nick Bosa. I didn't even bring up Nick Bosa yet. Nick Bosa, he tore his ACL. They were hopeful that it wasn't going to be a torn ACL, but Nick Bosa, he's out for the season now for the 49ers, who just can't seem to find a way to get healthy. Every single week they continue to win, but every single week they lose a major player. Brock Purdy might be able to come back this week, but they're still going to be without George Kittle. Brandon Ayuk is still coming off of an injury. And then again, you also have now Nick Bosa. Your biggest impact player on the defensive side besides Fred Warner is now out. So again, these injuries are starting to pile up, and we're just now getting to week 4. That's crazy to think about. Like, we are just 3 weeks through the season right now. Thursday night will mark the beginning of week 4. And so, again, these injuries, I'm sure I say this every year, people think this every year, but to me, there's just a lot more injuries this year than I've ever really seen. While we're going through here, again, make sure you make sure you comment. Tell me about what you think about this week's game. Is there a matchup that you're most excited about going into this week? For me, I'm a Ravens fan. If you didn't know that, I am a Ravens fan. I try to stay as less biased as possible on this show, in fairness, but at the same time, I'm really looking forward to the matchup between the Ravens and the Chiefs. After that Lions game, the Ravens need a bounce back game, and nothing better to have it against a team like the Chiefs, who seemingly have always had the Ravens number. But again, there's other exciting games that are out there. I know that people are obviously going to be excited to see what happens between Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. You know, his reunion, his homecoming. You know, my thumbnail is obviously about that matchup, because I think that's going to probably be the most anticipated game of this week. But again, there's still a lot of others, so we'll definitely dive into that. All right, so let's actually get into this slate of games. So Thursday night, right, the first game of this week is between the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this game, again, is being played in Arizona, and I've already mentioned the fact that James Conner is going to be out for this season, and that's going to have a huge impact on the Cardinals this season. You know, they actually started out 2-1. They lost their past game against. They lost their last game this past week, but at the same time, they've been playing better than I think a lot of people expected this week or this season. And so again, not having James Conner is going to have a huge impact on this game for the Arizona Cardinals. You know, someone that really is going to have to step up for the Cardinals, and I think this is a name that probably a lot of people are talking about, but Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to have to really step it up for the Cardinals for the rest of this season. You know, he's coming off of a really tough loss and a game where, you know, he actually had some key drops in that game. You know, they were playing the 49ers. Let me pull this up. Let me see if I can see. I'm just going to pull up this this box score. I'm curious to see what it actually was, because he had 3 receptions for 44 yards. Yeah, he had 3 receptions for 44 yards, but he also was targeted 6 times, and 2 of those were really crucial drops. Like, one of them, he was wide open. It was thrown right into his hands, and he just dropped it. And after the game, when Marvin Harrison was interviewed, he looked like he was flustered. He looked completely just exhausted and frustrated with himself. I thought he actually might even get into tears. You know, that's how frustrated Marvin Harrison Jr. looked after that game last week against the 49ers. And again, they are 2-1. The 49ers have a lot of injuries. Obviously, the Cardinals had a major injury with James Conner, but this is another divisional game. You know, the Seahawks are 2-1 as well, and they look a lot better than I think a lot of people expected with Sam Darnold at quarterback. You know, Mike McDonald is a really good coach. I've seen that even with him as a defensive coordinator. Again, might be biased because he, you know, was with the Ravens, but again, you know, you're gonna need to win this game if you're the Cardinals, if you want to stay, you know, a part of this battle, because again, the NFC West is looking a lot better than I think anyone really expected. The Cardinals, the Rams, the 49ers, the Seahawks, they all have winning records. That was not expected. You know, I was worried about the Rams with Matt Stafford's back. So again, you know, this might lower the Cardinals' chances of being a competitor in the playoffs. You know, talking a little bit more, you know, Trey McBride is also going to have to step it up in this game. You know, I do expect the Cardinals to really heavily depend on the passing game in this game. You know, Seattle has a really solid defense in both facets. You know, they're a top 10 team in stopping the run. So Trey Benson, you know, getting the carries, major carries in this game, he's going up against a really tough defense to go up against. And so again, Kyler Murray, you're going to have a good game, and you're going to have to do this very regularly throughout the season. And so Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, you're going to be crucial parts of that for the Panthers, for the Cardinals. Now, you know, on the side of the Seahawks, again, I've talked about this. Sam Darnold, he looks good out there. He's not blowing numbers out of the water. I wouldn't compare to him to having the season that Daniel Jones is having right now with the Colts. But at the same time, Sam Darnold is out competing, outplaying, his opposing quarterback on a pretty regular basis. I was watching him going up against the Steelers, up against Aaron Rodgers, and it was a night and day difference between those two quarterbacks. And so again, I do think that the Seahawks are going to have the upper hand in this game. A lot of that has to do with James Conner going down. I actually have the Seahawks winning this game 23-17. So that's really where I see this game going. And, we'll see what happens with the other games in the NFC West, but I think this is going to be an exciting battle to follow throughout the season, is this NFC West division. Next game I want to talk about is the Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are traveling to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. And this is an interesting game purely because of the fact that Carson Wentz most likely will be the starter for the Vikings against the Steelers. Now, the Steelers are coming off of a game where they caused 5 turnovers against the New England Patriots. 5 turnovers. Like, the Patriots outplayed the Steelers in every other facet of that game other than turnovers. And so that's such like an important factor to understand when looking at this team is, the Steelers, to me, they're not like an amazing team. They're not a playoff caliber team for the most part. But what I can say is they have game breakers out there. They have players that can disrupt the game and just with one play have a huge impact on the game. I will not take that away from the Steelers. You have T.J. Watt, you have Jalen Ramsey, right? There's Cameron Hayward out there that's constantly disrupting plays, punching the ball out, getting sacks. Right, there's a bunch of studs that this Steelers team have on their defense. Now, I will say their offense is not explosive whatsoever. Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf clearly aren't on the same page, and I don't know if they're necessarily using DK Metcalf in the right way as well. That's something I'm also considering and looking at. But again, on the Vikings side, you have Carson Wentz, who to me, he's a serviceable quarterback. He had a really good game against the Bengals. Now, that is the Bengals. Their defense is not good, right? The Steelers' defense is much better than the Bengals' defense. And so I think it's going to be a little bit of a different story. But Carson Wentz is also getting another week under his belt in this offense and getting more comfortable with his weapons. Another big addition, and I think this will be something that I think will have a big impact on this game, is the fact that Jordan Addison should be back for this game for the Minnesota Vikings. They've been without that wide receiver for the first 3 games because of a suspension. And so Jordan Addison getting reinstated is a huge addition for the Vikings. You also have to look at the fact that, to me, Jordan Mason has been a great running back for the Vikings as well. He has 40 carries for 214 yards and 2 touchdowns this season. And that's him being behind Aaron Jones for half of these games as well. And so if Jordan Mason is able to have an impactful game in the run for the Vikings, I think you actually have a really good chance if you're the Vikings to win this game. Again, on the Steelers side, I'll go back to them real quick from an offensive perspective. Again, they really do need to figure things out. They do not have a run game whatsoever. Their offensive line is shaky at best. I was watching that game, and you just have an old quarterback that is not mobile anymore. Like, can he run? Sure, but he's nowhere near the ability that he used to be from a running perspective, especially. And so when you have a line that's like Swiss cheese, you're going to have a lot of issues, and you're going up against the AFC North generally when you're the Steelers, and that's not an easy division to go up against when you're a quarterback. And so again, I am concerned about this Steelers offense. I am curious to see if they start to figure some things out. They really need to figure out their wide receiver 2 situation. Last week they had Calvin Austin stepped it up for them, but I just don't see that being an every week sort of thing. I think you'll have, peaks and valleys, but again, I do not expect him to have that sort of game on a regular basis. I don't think, when it comes to what I expect in this game, I don't think the Steelers defense will have 5 turnovers in this game. I don't think that's what they need to have to win this game, but I just don't see the Steelers being able to do the same thing against this Vikings offense that they did against the Patriots. The Patriots don't know how to run the ball so far this year. It's seemingly that they don't even have a run game. The Vikings are successful in the run, and I think that's going to be something that really the Vikings are going to focus on in this game. I expect the Vikings to actually win this game 23-17. I think it's going to be a really close one, but to me, I just think the Vikings overall are a better team. I think their defense is much better than the Steelers' offense, and I think they're going to cause problems for Aaron Rodgers. The Steelers, I think they might get one of their touchdowns this week from a defensive play. I think their defense might score as many points as their offense this week. That also is a bold prediction, maybe a bad take on my part, but I really do expect that just because this Vikings offense is much better than the Steelers offense, and their defenses are pretty comparable. So again, I have the Vikings winning this game 23-17. Again, while you're in here, make sure you comment, make sure you're in chat. Tell me what you think about this week's games. I talked about the injuries already, talked about the Thursday night football game. What matchup are you most excited to watch? Again, just make sure you comment, make sure you chat. I want this to be as conversational as possible. Let's have some fun in here. All right, going into this next game, we're going to talk about the Washington Commanders going to Atlanta to face the Falcons. It's still unknown if Jaden Daniels is going to start this game. My opinion, it's probably going to be leaning towards not, for a couple of reasons. I think when you're talking about a quarterback like a Jaden Daniels, one, you have to protect him and you have to protect his future. I know that he's dealing with just like a sprain from an injury perspective, but you're going up against Atlanta Falcons, and I'm sorry, Atlanta, but I'm not sold on you, and I don't think you're that good of a team. I think the offense was expecting Michael Penix to be a lot further along than he is, and what I've seen from Michael Penix is, he's had flashes. I think he had a pretty solid game his first week, but he's still young. He makes mistakes. Yeah, I saw a stat. I don't think the Falcons got beyond the Panthers' 30-yard line last week. And that's the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are not known for defense. They are known for having a bad defense, in fact. And so when you're Atlanta, you have a weapon like a Bijan Robinson, and you have weapons like Drake London out there, and you can't get past the Panthers' 30-yard line. There are some serious issues going on there. There's no doubt in my mind about that. I don't know if it's communication. I don't know if Michael Penix isn't making decisions fast enough, if he's not being accurate, or just the offensive play style doesn't work well with the weapons that they have. They saw success in the past. Last year you saw Kirk Cousins be able to move the ball down the field. His biggest issue was turnovers. And so, again, it's not like I don't think this system works. I do think that Michael Penix is just further back from where they expected him to be when it comes to starting the season. I talked about this early on. It didn't make sense to me that Michael Penix wasn't playing in preseason games. You generally do not see first or second year quarterbacks not playing in preseason. It's pivotal to get that experience, whether it's getting the play calls in, it's calling the plays to your team, making adjustments at the line, reading defenses in general, getting used to the game speed in the NFL. Like, there's so many different factors that lead into being successful as a quarterback in the NFL, and I felt like they were just banking on Michael Penix to be a stud for them. Now, again, going back to this game, for me, I think that this game just has a Commanders victory written all over it. I think I do expect the Falcons defense to play better than they played last week. The Panthers, they did put up 30 points. It wasn't from like a lot of yards at the same time. I will say that. Chuba Hubbard had a decent game, but I think Bryce Young threw for like 168 yards or something like that. So it wasn't like overly. It wasn't like they were just bombing the ball down the field or having big play after big play. A lot of it had to do with the offense struggling so much and the Panthers getting such good field possession in order to score points. Like, that was the biggest factor in that game. And so, again, for me, I think the Commanders' defense is better. One thing I will be looking for, because it looks to me like not only will Jaden Daniels be out, but it looks to me like Terry McLaurin will also be out. There's a chance he'll be out with a quad injury. And so, again, what is Deebo Samuel going to look like out there? Marcus Mariota is going to need a player like a Deebo Samuel to be successful. And so, again, I haven't seen what I expected out of Deebo Samuel either. I know this is still early on in the season. Not playing in preseason games has a huge factor, right? This is essentially still almost like it's the last 3 weeks were preseason games. And so you really need to see, is Deebo going to get on track with this Commanders offense? Because he's one of those people, if he's not happy, he's very vocal about it. I remember like the last 3 years Deebo Samuel was in San Francisco, he was asking for a trade. Some of it might have to do with money, but at the same time, he was constantly asking for a trade out of San Francisco, and they were a successful team. And so he's not one of those people that's just going to stick around if he's not happy. It doesn't matter the reason why, but that, to me, I think it's going to be important to get Deebo Samuel going in this game. I do think he will step it up, though. I'm actually a big Deebo Samuel fan. So for me, I think that the Commanders are going to win this game. I think they're going to win this game 24-14. I just don't have confidence in the Falcons' offense, and so I don't see them scoring much more than 14 points in this game. Might even be 24-17. Next game we're going to get into, this one I think is going to be probably the most uneventful game of this week. You kind of look at games like this and you're just like, what do I even look for? What do I even watch for? And I'm talking about the New Orleans Saints are going up against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. Now, right off the bat, huge mismatch. Buffalo is looking like one of the best teams in the NFL, and the Saints are looking like potentially the worst team in the NFL, if not the worst team in the NFL. And so you have to look at this and say, like, one, if you're the Saints, what are you trying to get out of this game? And if I'm the Saints, I just want to continuously see more progression from Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler, I will say this, he looks like he belongs in the NFL. I'm not saying he belongs as a starting quarterback, but Spencer Rattler does belong in the NFL, and I think he would be a serviceable backup to any team right now, right? I think he would be a valuable addition as a backup to any team. At the same time, you're going up against the Buffalo Bills, and the Buffalo Bills know how to put up points, and the Saints don't. The Saints haven't been able to get over 24 points in a game yet, and that's why they're losing. 24 points. Drew Brees said that's the magic number for the Saints in order for them to win games, and they haven't been able to get there yet. And so I'm curious to see, the Bills' defense isn't necessarily the tops in the NFL. They're not one of the best, but at the same time, I think the biggest thing you're going to see from this Bills team is them just running the clock. I see them running a lot in this game. I don't think they're going to go into this game saying, like, hey, let's blow out the Saints. I think that's going to be a given. And so if you're the Saints, one, you want to see more continuity on the defense. You want to see them actually making some plays, maybe breaking up some passes, maybe causing a fumble or getting an interception. And if you're the Bills, you just want to have a clean game where someone doesn't get injured. That's the biggest goal, I think, in this game for the Bills. It's almost like a preseason game. It truly is. Like, just don't get injured. Like, find a way to get out of this game as healthy as possible. For the game, I expect the Bills to win this game. I expect them to win it big. I think the Bills are going to win this game 34-13. Again, while you're in here, make sure you comment. Tell me what team you're a fan of. Tell me what team you're cheering for, what matchup you're most excited about, whatever that might be. Again, just make sure you comment in here. I'm curious to hear more about you, my fans out here, and see what teams people are fans of. We'll be getting into the next game shortly. While I'm doing that, any bold predictions? Anyone predicting an upset for the Saints? Do the Saints have any chance, you think? I guess my guy Ashton's not in here. I figured he would be yelling from the mountaintops about that. Let's go into the next game. Next game is actually the Cleveland Browns against the Detroit Lions. Now, I talked about the Saints and the Bills and talking about how there's zero chance that the Saints win that game. Before last week, I would have said the same thing about the Cleveland Browns going up against the Detroit Lions. I would say there is zero shot that the Browns would beat the Lions. But after seeing the Browns beat the Packers, I think this actually might be somewhat of an interesting game. And I think the biggest thing will be, how does Myles Garrett match up against these tackles for the Detroit Lions? The Detroit Lions didn't allow a single sack from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Baltimore Ravens pass rush is nowhere close to the Cleveland Browns pass rush. I'll say that. But again, Jared Goff didn't get hit once by the Baltimore Ravens. And so Myles Garrett, you're going to have to get to the quarterback. You're going to have to cause Jared Goff to rush out of the pocket, to scramble, to get flustered, if you want to have any chance in this game. Now, again, the Browns, their defense is stout. They do not allow a lot of yards on the ground, so I'm not expecting a big game out of Josh Jacobs. And Jordan Love is going to need to be he's going to need to have a solid game against this Browns defense. They have really good cornerbacks. Like, Denzel Ward is one of the best cornerbacks in the league. And so, again, when you have Myles Garrett rushing from the edge, and you're waiting for one of your receivers, i.e., I'll say, Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jameson Williams, you need them to get open as quickly as possible, because your mental clock, when you're going up against an edge rusher like a Myles Garrett, it just goes that much faster. It really does. Counting to 3, it's more like 2 seconds. Because you're just saying, like, hey, like, he's got to be close. He's got to be close. There's a funny clip going around. I don't know if you guys saw this, where Myles Garrett was going up against one of the Packers linemen, and he juked the guy out and then went in. And as he was running past this lineman, the lineman runs, "Jordan, run!" And you're just like, wow, like that just happened. And Myles Garrett got to get a laugh at it. He didn't sack Jordan Love on that play. The guy yelling "Jordan, run" probably actually saved the play, because he did run after that and was able to scramble and get the ball off. But at the same time, if you're doing that constantly as the Detroit Lions, like, I think Penei Sewell is a great tackle. I think Taylor Decker is also a good tackle. I expect Myles Garrett to line up on Taylor Decker's side a lot more than Penei Sewell's, because that's going to be your best chance at a mismatch. But again, I think that's going to be the biggest aspect of this game. The Lions team overall is just a really solid team. Like, what they did to the Ravens defense is just, they ran all over them. They just absolutely embarrassed this Ravens defense. Like, if I'm the Ravens, I'm very concerned, because what the Lions did to you, what the Bills have done to you, it's just bad. But again, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Lions team is just solid overall. I expect the Lions to actually win this game 24-13. I don't think the Browns are going to be able to pull off another upset. If they do, congratulations to them. But this game is in Detroit, and I expect the Lions to come out, and I think they're going to win this game pretty easily. Next game we're going to talk about, Carolina Panthers versus the New England Patriots. Now, the Panthers are coming off a really big win. They beat the Falcons 30-0 last week. I've already mentioned that. And so the Panthers actually have to have a little bit of confidence going into this game. That is, to me, the biggest issue that the Panthers have, is just confidence and then also cohesiveness. I'm not saying they have the same issues that the Dolphins do, but Bryce Young, when that guy is struggling, he really struggles. Like, he has high highs and he has super low lows. He does not seem, even though he doesn't show a lot of emotion, he is not a cool, calm, and collected quarterback. I don't think there's a single person that would ever describe Bryce Young as cool, calm, and collected from his play. Maybe from his demeanor, I'll say that. You don't see it on his face all the time, but the way he plays and how he performs when he is struggling, he gets 10 times worse. He does not know how to turn it around. He really doesn't. But again, when he's playing well, he is playing well. And so they really need to work and like keep running with the confidence they got from beating the Falcons if they want to win this game. And on the Patriots side, they're moving the ball down the field. Their offense looks a lot better than the Panthers' offense does. I can assure you of that. But you can't keep giving the ball up. 5 turnovers in a game, that's terrible. Like you're not gonna win a single game. I think the Patriots, if they had 5 turnovers against an SEC football team, would probably lose that game. I'm not even joking. Like that's just terrible to have. Like they're outgaining their opponents. The other aspect of this is the fact that they just can't run the ball. TreVeyon Henderson is the biggest mystery disappointment so far this year to me that I've seen. Like I thought he was going to come into this league and just come in like a bat out of hell. I thought he was going to be a game-breaking style running back. And neither he nor Ramondre Stevenson can run the ball consistently. Their running game is absolutely terrible to watch. Now, on the Carolina side, they're seeing a little bit more success in the run. I will say that. Chuba Hubbard, he's the leader of this team. There's no doubt in my mind about that, especially on the offensive side. And Bryce Young, his favorite target is Ted McMillan, but that's really all he has. I think Tommy Trimble is a decent tight end, but Xavier Legette shouldn't even be out there on that field. And Jalen Coker's injured, and you no longer have Adam Thielen. And so when you're the Panthers, all you have to count on from an offensive perspective in the pass game is Ted McMillan. So Ted McMillan, he hasn't been able to get into the end zone. That's the other interesting aspect. He's getting the yards, but he hasn't been able to get in the end zone yet. I'm expecting Ted to actually get his first receiving touchdown in this week's game. Now, when it comes to like actually where I see this game going, I think this is going to be a sloppy game. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I don't think either of these teams are that good right now. I really do think that both of these teams are looking in the bottom tier of the NFL right now. Just because this game is in New England, that's really the only reason why I'm going to go with the Patriots to win this game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring, ugly game, probably a fair amount of turnovers on both sides. I think the Patriots will win this game 17-13. That's really where I see this game going. Next game we're going to be talking about the first game that Jackson Dart will be starting for the New York Giants. We're talking about the Los Angeles Chargers playing against the New York Giants. Now, this is a game where, again, Najee Harris will not be out there for the Chargers. I don't think that's going to be a game-breaking situation for the Chargers in this game. To me, the Chargers are the best team in the AFC, along with the Buffalo Bills. And the New York Giants, they're struggling, and they have a rookie quarterback in his first start going up against probably one of the best defenses in the NFL. The Chargers are without Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack had a serious injury happen. But I also still expect the Chargers to go out there and actually dominate this game. I like Jackson Dart. I really hope Jackson Dart is successful out there, and I think he'll be better out there than Russell Wilson would be. But again, it's your first start, and you're going up against Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers. On top of that, Justin Herbert, I'm one of those people, I'll be honest, I was one of those people that I never believed in the hype of Justin Herbert. It would actually piss me off. I didn't understand why people liked Justin Herbert so much because he never won big games. I'm really starting to see that. I don't think that's the case this year, though. Like, winning that game in Brazil, he's 3-0 this year so far, and he just looks different out there. He looks like to be poised. He looks to have confidence, probably because he's dating Madison Beer. Let's be honest. Like, you're probably super jacked up about life if that's who you're dating. Let's be real. But at the same time, he also has an amazing wide receiving core. Quentin Johnston. If you're a Quentin Johnston hater, please raise your hand. Tell me who you are, because I'm watching this guy, and he's completely turned it around. He might actually be the guy with the most amount of significant plays in the pass game for the Chargers so far this year. I'm gonna look at this real quick. Let me pull up the stats for this Chargers team when it comes to. Yeah, Quentin Johnson, he's leading this team in receiving yards this year. He's also tied with Keenan Allen for touchdowns. Quentin Johnson has 239 yards through 3 games, and he has 3 touchdowns. I said this in the beginning of the year. I love this wide receiving core. Like, Glad McConkey's not even having the year I expected, and I still love this receiving core. I think so many people are paying attention to Lad, and that's why he is struggling. But Keenan Allen is such a good route runner. He has amazing hands. I think it was such a blessing to the Chargers that he came back. I really do think that. And I'm so happy for Quentin Johnson. Like, Quentin Johnson having the game and having the season that he's been having is awesome to see, because again, he was getting knocked for his hands and dropping the ball, but this year he's making those catches and he's making the plays. And so again, for this game, I think the biggest aspect is the passing attack that the Chargers have. It's also going to be the fact that Jackson Dart is just inexperienced. I just don't think I can expect much out of Jackson Dart from this perspective. If the Giants do want to have a chance in this game, it's going to have to come from their pass rush disrupting Justin Herbert. Like, can you make Justin Herbert flustered? That's going to be the biggest tell and the biggest determination, in my opinion. I'm also curious to see how Amarian Hampton handles the majority of the carries now. Because, again, the run game, you're going to have to use that run game to set up the pass game. The Giants' defense isn't anything spectacular, but they do have a good pass rush. And so, again, when it comes down to what I actually expect in this game, where I see this game going, I see the Chargers winning this game in New York 27-17. I do think Jackson Dart will have a pretty up and down game. I wouldn't be surprised if he struggled at first, gets a little bit flustered. But I love this guy's moxie. I think his confidence will get there, and I see them being able to make some plays. Next game we're going to be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, if Mike Evans, I'll say this right now, if Mike Evans was not injured, if Chris Godwin was not injured, I would 100% be picking the Bucs in this game. Maybe I'm a Philadelphia Eagles hater. Maybe part of that is because I despise their offense. Like, their offense to me is just so boring. It's so bland. I will say Jalen Hurts finally remembered how to pass the ball, and he also remembered that he has A.J. Brown on his team. The second half of last week's game against the Rams, he realized, I have like an all-pro caliber wide receiver, and he's going to need to do that in this game, because regardless of the weapons that Baker Mayfield has out there, again, I love this Bucs team, and I'm loving what Baker Mayfield is doing this year. They're going to be able to put up points, regardless of who Baker Mayfield's weapons are. Micah is an absolute stud. I've talked about him earlier in this podcast. I've talked about him in prior podcasts as well. I think he's the best receiver that is coming out of that draft class. And so, again, to me, if they had Mike Evans out there and Chris Godwin, 100% choosing the Bucs in this game. Now, on the other side of that, this Eagles defense is scary. This Eagles defense is the real deal. They struggled against the Rams in the first half, but they shut them down basically in the second half. I think the Rams in the second half only got 3 points on the board. They were completely shut down. And so, again, they have the line, they have the linebackers, and they have the secondary. Real quick on that, do you think how funny would it be if the Eagles brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson? Does anyone think there's a chance that C.J. Gardner-Johnson comes back to Philly after they traded him? That would be such a funny situation, because, again, he has vocally talked about how much he didn't like playing for the Eagles, and he got traded. And so now there's a chance for him to come back. So I'm curious, does anyone think that C.J. Gardner-Johnson would come back to the Eagles? Now, again, going back to things, if you're the Eagles, the biggest thing you need to focus on is shutting down Emeka Egbuka. I think they're going to really key on him. I'm not sure if it'll be Quinyon Mitchell that they put on him or who it might be, but I do expect them to have a safety over top on Emeka Egbuka this whole game. And from a defensive perspective or offensive perspective, Saquon Barkley needs to get back going. Saquon Barkley struggled against the Rams, and so I'm curious to see if they get him back on track and if they focusing on the run a lot. I think a lot of that again will have to do with how many points the Bucs are putting up. I think the Eagles would much rather prefer just to be running the ball most of the time. That's what their offense has really been for the majority of the beginning of this season. But again, I think you're going to have to put up more points against a team like the Bucs. I think the Eagles are going to hand the Bucs. Sorry, I think the Eagles are going to hand the Bucs their first loss of the season. I see the Bucs winning this game, the Eagles winning this game 24-17. Next game we're going to be talking about playoff implications, guys. This is a huge matchup that I'm going to be talking about next. So make sure you stay tuned. I am talking about the Tennessee Titans playing against the Houston Texans. 2 0-3 teams. I mean, first off, what I'll say about this game could go either way. Literally, this game could go either way. There's just so much wrong with both of these teams that this might be one of the most entertaining games, or it could be the most boring game of the week. Because again, I talked about the Saints being one of the worst teams in the NFL. The Titans are right there. They really are. Something I'm curious to see, and probably the most interesting aspect, is what is the play calling going to be like for the Tennessee Titans? Bill Callahan, the head coach, he handed off the play calling. He handed off the play calling duties to Bo Hardegree, their quarterback coach. To me, all that says is Bill Callahan knows that his time in Tennessee is numbered. He's not doing this because he thinks they're calling the wrong plays. He's doing this because there is someone that's telling him, hey, you're on the chopping block. And when people are on the chopping block, generally they take less responsibility. They're like, hey, let someone else handle this. I'm obviously not doing a good job. And so it's I'm not saying he's looking for a way to point fingers, because I don't think that's the type of person Bill Callahan is. But he's probably also trying to figure out anything he can do to try to save his job, and maybe someone else will call better plays. Now, the challenge for Bo in this situation, Bo Hardegree, the quarterback coach that will be calling these plays, is he can't catch the ball from Cam Ward. The biggest issue for this Tennessee Titans team is their wide receiving core. I mean, I'll say this, there are a lot of issues, but they cannot catch the ball. They just do not have the playmakers out there. Like Tony Pollard, you have to be 100-yard a game sort of running back for this Titans team to see any sort of success, because they just can't catch the ball. Like Bill Callahan even brought up just the lack of confidence that Calvin Ridley had. Like Calvin Ridley was supposed to be the wide receiver one. I don't think he's anywhere close to that. But again, you got to figure out a way to catch the ball. You got to figure out a way to get the ball down the field. Now, on the other side, the Texans, CJ Stroud, he's probably having like a crisis internally, because does anyone remember what he was like after his first year? After the first year, CJ Stroud was one of the most confident, just talking shit, like I'm better than you sort of mentalities. He was talking shit to everyone. He had this like my shit doesn't stink sort of mentality. He was on podcasts talking about this player, that player, this team, that team, as if he knew exactly what he was talking about, as if he actually earned the right to do that. And in all fairness to him, like he did have a good rookie season, but this year so far for CJ Stroud has been abysmal. I know their offensive line is really bad, but good quarterbacks are able to work with bad offensive lines regardless. I mean, I'll give Lamar Jackson as an example. Lamar Jackson got sacked 7 times in the game against the Detroit Lions, but he still threw for 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. CJ Stroud, he hasn't topped like 220 yards yet this year. That is not like CJ Stroud, especially with the weapons that he has. Even last year when they struggled a little bit, their passing offense was prolific. They were getting the ball down the field constantly, just early and often. I don't know if losing John Mechie has this much of an impact on the passing game. I do know they've played musical chairs when it comes to their offensive line, and that's probably a huge aspect of it as well. But when I look at C.J. Stroud, I look at a guy that just has zero confidence. And for that, like I just don't have much trust in him. Again, in this game, we're talking about them playing against the Titans, who I just think are a little bit worse than the Texans. And so I actually have the Texans winning this game 21-17. That's really where I see this game going. It's 21-17. Next game we're going to talk about Indianapolis Colts versus the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I love what Daniel Jones and the Colts have been doing this season. I think this is one of the best stories. I'll be the first to tell you I did not trust it. I thought that they were going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they're looking like the powerhouse of the AFC South, which doesn't say much. The AFC South is not good, but at the same time, they are 3-0. I don't think that's a fluke anymore. Like, I think some people are looking at that game and they're a little worried. They're like, hey, or looking at this. I think that people are looking at these games like, oh, like they'll come back to reality this week. They'll come back to reality this week, but they just keep doing it. Now, I will say, Jonathan Taylor does have a big side of that. I think Jonathan Taylor is playing at an MVP level. He's leading the league right now in all-purpose yards. Let me pull this up for you real fast. Jonathan Taylor, he has 338 yards rushing right now, which is 60 yards more than the next player. In a 3-game span, that's a huge disparity. That is a huge amount. So again, Jonathan Taylor, he's playing at MVP level. He has 3 touchdowns. If you look at his receiving stats, let's pull this up real quick. Receiving wise this year, he has 93 yards and a touchdown as well. So again, he's playing at an MVP caliber level. Now, he's going to have to keep that up, especially against the Los Angeles Rams, if the Indianapolis Colts want to have any shot in this game. I will say that. The other aspect of this is the fact that the Rams are coming off of a really tough loss. Losing to the Eagles after being up, getting 2 field goals blocked at the end of the game to lose the game. They do have a bad taste in their mouth. I know Sean McVay is one of the best coaches. Matt Stafford, he is a true leader, and as long as his back is healthy, they are an elite team, especially in the NFC. So to me, there's 2 main factors for this game. First off is, how does Jonathan Taylor do against this Rams defense? This Rams defense is electric. They're young, they're fast, and they're powerful. They know how to get to the quarterback, and they also know how to stop the run. They really do. Like they did a great job of shutting down Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. And so you're going up against the Colts, who have arguably the best running back so far this year. Can Jonathan Taylor find a way to get through this Rams defense is going to be a huge factor. The other aspect of this that I'm curious to see is, can Tyler Warren have a career game in this game? I know he's a rookie. This is only his 4th game of his career, but he's going to have a really good game in this game for the Colts to have a shot, in my opinion. I think the Rams are going to win this game. I think they'll win this game 24-14. Again, when you're in here, make sure you chat. Tell me what game you're most excited about. We're actually going to be coming up on the game that I'm most excited to watch. So again, let me know which game you're most excited to see. Any matchups, any players. Again, I want this to be a good time. I want us all to hang out. Tell me your takes. Are my takes terrible? Whatever that might be. Let's have a good time in here. Next game I'm going to be talking about. The Baltimore Ravens are going to Kansas City to play the Chiefs. Now, I think before this season started, everyone would say, hey, this is an AFC championship matchup, right? Lamar Jackson going up against Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes has had the Ravens' number. He's had Lamar Jackson's number so far in this series. Lamar Jackson, I think, has won 1 game against this Kansas City Chiefs team. They were close. They had 1 toe out of bounds last year that hurt that record. But again, the Chiefs have owned the Ravens the past couple years. Both teams are hungry too. Both teams are 1-2. Like this is, I hate to use this term, especially this early in the season, but this is a must-win game for these teams. The Ravens have lost 2 games, both against really good teams, against the Bills and against the Lions. And the Chiefs have lost to 2 really good teams, the Chargers and the Eagles. And so being 1-2 in really tough divisions, being 1-3 is so much harder to come back from. Neither of these teams have easy schedules, and so you need to find ways to win games as early on as possible in order to have a chance to get good playoff, good playoff seed. And so again, I'm really curious to see what happens in this game. I'm really worried about this Ravens defense. I'll be the first to say this. They're dead last in both passing and rushing defense. They did the same thing last year and turned it around at halfway through the season. They don't have the luxury of doing that this year. They really don't. They're just not good enough in order to make those sorts of mistakes and let up so many yards and so many touchdowns. Because their defense is Swiss cheese. Now, the good news for the Ravens is the fact that the Chiefs' offense is not good either right now. The Chiefs' offense, it's essentially Patrick Mahomes either making plays with his arm or with his legs. Like Travis Kelce isn't going to be effective in this game. He generally isn't until later on in the season. He saves his legs. Isaiah Pacheco, for some reason, has lost his ability to be an effective runner. I'm not sure if it's his leg injury or what, but that guy used to be his legs were always constantly moving. He was constantly breaking tackles, constantly moving the pile. And I haven't seen that out of him yet this year. So again, you're seeing a really bad Ravens defense play against a really bad Chiefs offense. That's such a crazy thing to say, but it's the truth. When you think about these Chiefs teams, you think about their offense. When you think about the Ravens team, you think about their defense. And both of them are not good right now. Now, on the other side of the ball, the Ravens offense is great, but so is the Chiefs defense. Like, this is going to be a really exciting matchup. I'm really worried for Lamar Jackson and whether or not this offensive line is going to be able to hold up against this Chiefs defensive line. Like, George Karlaftis and Chris Jones are going to be coming after Lamar Jackson on a regular basis. Because, again, if you watch what the Lions did, it made it so that they couldn't run the ball. The other thing I need to see Derrick Henry not fumble the ball. Derrick Henry has 3 fumbles in 3 games, 2 of which were in pivotal situations. The fumble against the Bills game lost them that game. The fumble and sealed that game. The fumble against the Lions sealed that game for the Lions as well. The Ravens were going down the field. They were marching down that field, and when he had that ball punched out, it made it so there was 0 chance for the Ravens to win that game. We talked about, being flustered. I've never seen Derrick Henry respond and react the way he did. He looked like a child out there. Lamar Jackson also was frustrated out there. Lamar Jackson, he was pissed. You could just tell he hated the play calls last week as well. And so the Ravens really need to figure out a lot of stuff. They need to figure out a lot of stuff from a mental perspective. Like they need to figure out stuff inside that locker room. Play calling, the defense, offensive line. Like all of those things are not good right now for the Ravens. It's crazy that I'm saying all this stuff because, again, I still think this is a game where the Ravens find a way to pull this one out. I think without Rashee Rice, if Xavier Worthy's back, maybe it's a different story, and maybe he will come back. But I think the Ravens are probably more desperate than the Chiefs are. I really actually believe that. I think the Ravens are looking at this game saying, like, this is going to make or break us. They've been in a situation where they've been 1-2 in the past going into week 4. The Chiefs aren't necessarily used to this sort of world. And so we'll see how they respond. This might be a crazy take. Tell me, maybe this is because I'm a Ravens fan. I predicted the Ravens to lose against the Lions, so I feel like I'm pretty fair. I predicted them to lose against the Bills. But I actually have the Ravens winning this game, and I think it's going to be a close one. I think that the Ravens will win this game 21-20. It's going to be a nail-biter. I think this game is going to be ugly back and forth, probably a fair amount of turnovers from Lamar getting sacked and getting strip-sacked. And I think, hopefully the Ravens defense can find a way to cause some turnovers against the Chiefs offense because, again, if they don't, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. But for some reason, I just have the feeling the Ravens are going to win this game 21-20. Next game I'm going to get into, the Chiefs, or sorry, not the Chiefs, the Chicago Bears versus the Las Vegas Raiders. So, Caleb Williams had a good game last week, right? He has to have some confidence going into this game. The Raiders on the other side of this, they lost the last two games, and I wouldn't say it's because of Geno Smith. A lot of it has to do with their defense. And so that's a big reason why when I look at this game, I think it's going to be a really big game for Caleb Williams and this Bears offense. I think you're really actually going to see this Bears offense get into a pretty good flow in this game. I think they're going to be able to move the ball down the field, and they're going to be able to move the ball down the field often. Now, on the other side, Geno Smith actually looks good for the Raiders. The rest of the team is just not good. That's the biggest issue. Like, they don't know how to use Ashton Genty. And I'll say this one more time about Ashton Genty. I think Ashton Genty should not have been drafted as early as he was. I think Ashton Genty is good at everything, but he's not great at anything. Maybe great at breaking tackles, but that's about it. I just don't think he's a game breaker. I don't think he's going to be a difference maker. I think he's a solid running back. Like, I'll compare him, like, who I would compare Ashton Genty to is, like, if you remember Marion Barber. Right, I think Ashton Genty is a Marion Barber style running back. The Raiders also just haven't been able to figure out how to get him going. I think a big part of that is the offensive line. I won't put it all on Ashton Genty. You know, I saw a stat that he has like 145 all-purpose yards. He's got like 146 of them are from, or like he has 146 yards, and like all of them are after being touched. So it's like after the first contact is when he's getting all of his yards, and it's like at the line of scrimmage. So like the teams are penetrating this offensive line of the Raiders, and so I think that's a big reason why Ashton Genty is struggling. Because I wouldn't say I've been impressed at all with how he's played so far. I think he's better than how he's been playing. I also just don't think that he's like the answer. Is really what it comes down to. And so for me, again, I think this is a great game for the Bears to continue getting momentum. I think Ben Johnson will continue his momentum of working on his relationship with Caleb Williams and getting this offense to become more and more dangerous. I expect that the Bears will win this game 23-17. You know, that's really where I see this game ending up. Bears winning 23-17. Next game we're going to talk about, Sunday Night Football, right? I think this is the matchup everyone's excited about. There's going to be so much drama. There's going to be so much attention on it. I'm talking about Sunday Night Football, the Green Bay Packers going to Dallas to face the Cowboys. It's the homecoming game between Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. Right off the bat, the first thing I need to talk about when it comes to this game is CeeDee Lamb being out for the Cowboys makes it so hard for the Cowboys to win this game. You know, the Packers showed that they're mortal, right? The Packers lost to the Browns, and I think that was a wake-up call for them. I think they actually needed that. They seem to be, you know, really buying into the media hype and everyone talking about how they're a Super Bowl team. You know, they had a player that came out and said, like, I don't think there's a single team that can beat us. You know, that's good to have that sort of confidence. You don't really need to say that, though, to the media. It just fuels the fire. And you got put on your ass by the Cleveland Browns. No one expected that, but that happened, and that's why any given Sunday, right? So the Cowboys have a shot in this game, but again, CeeDee Lamb being out for the Cowboys really hurts them. I think the other, obviously, story that everyone wants to talk about and focus on is Micah Parsons coming home. The first question I have, and you guys tell me, do you guys think that Micah Parsons will get booed when he shows up in Dallas? Like when they announce his name in the starting lineup, or he runs out onto the field, or the first time he makes a tackle or a sack, are the Dallas Cowboys fans going to boo Micah Parsons? Like that would be kind of crazy if they did. It wasn't his decision to be traded. Like he did request a trade, but he requested a trade because it was obviously not fixable what was happening between Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones. That's very obvious. Another important aspect for this game, in a way that I think that the Cowboys can have a shot at this game, is, does Javonte Williams, is he able to run on this Packers defense? You know, Jerry Jones, this is the perfect time for you to show that Micah Parsons isn't good at stopping the run. Like if I'm Jerry Jones, I am telling Schottenheimer, like, you need to run this ball 40 times in this game, because one, you don't have CeeDee Lamb. You can throw the ball to George Pickens, but again, I need to prove that getting Kenny Clark was a good idea, and letting go of Micah Parsons was a good idea. So, like, I'm expecting Jerry Jones to tell Schottenheimer, like, hey, I need you to run this ball 40 times, and, like, you need to be successful with it. So if the Cowboys want to have any chance in this game, I think you're going to need to see Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders for combining to over 150 yards. Like, that's the only way I really see the Cowboys having a true legitimate shot in this game. Because again, without CeeDee Lamb, you just can focus so much of your passing defense on George Pickens. And George Pickens is a good receiver, but he's not CeeDee Lamb, right? CeeDee Lamb is essentially one of one in my opinion. He's a great receiver. And so you really need to have him be effective. Now, going back to the Micah Parsons situation really fast, I'm curious, how many times do you think Micah Parsons is going to sack Dak Prescott? Or do you think that the Cowboys offensive line is going to do everything they possibly can, even double teaming him when unnecessary, to make sure that Micah Parsons doesn't get a sack? Because that to me would be like the ultimate icing on the cake for Micah, is if he's able to get to Dak Prescott. He was actually interviewed, and I think they're trying to take it out of context or make it seem like what it was. He said it's going to be extremely painful to sack Dak. Now, when you take it, says it's going to be extremely painful when talking about sacking Dak Prescott, you can either make that sound like, oh, like he's gonna bring the pain to Dak Prescott, but I think he was actually saying it like it's going to hurt to sack Dak, because I think he likes Dak Prescott, and I think they're friends. And so again, I'm going to be really curious to see if he gets a sack in this game. I expect the camera, like kind of like the Taylor Swift camera when Chiefs are playing, like there's always a camera looking for Taylor Swift and on Taylor Swift at all times. I think there's going to be like a Micah Parsons camera. They're just going to constantly be showing Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones. I think actually we should probably make a game. I'll have to figure out a way to track this, but like over under showing Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons 20 times in this game. And I'm not saying like when Micah Parsons is making a play, like I'm talking about like when he's on the sideline or he's just standing there. Like I think that's when they're just going to constantly have the camera on him, because it's just that's what everyone's wanting to see, is this homecoming matchup, right? So again, I'm really curious to see what happens there. When it comes to like what I actually expect in this game, I think the Packers, again, I think they got a wake-up call. I think they got put on their ass, and they actually needed that. Like sometimes you need to lose as a team to regroup and recenter. And so again, I think the Packers are going to win this game in Dallas. I think they win this game 27-17. So I don't even think it's going to be that close of a game. I expect a double-digit win. A lot of that has to do with the fact that CeeDee Lamb is out, though. So again, that's the Sunday slate of games. Went through the Thursday night game as well. What do you guys think about these matchups? Again, going through there, were there any matchups other than the Cowboys and the Cowboys and the Packers? And then obviously, I think people are excited about the Ravens playing against the Chiefs. I think the Eagles and the Buccaneers, if they were healthy on the receiving side of the ball for the Bucs, I think that would be also like a marquee matchup. But yeah, what game is everyone most excited to see? All right, if we got no takers on that, that's it. That's going to be it for me today. I really do appreciate everyone joining in. Again, I'm doing live streams every Monday and every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm going over the games that happen on Sunday and previewing Monday's game on Monday. And then Wednesday is a preview of the next week's matchups, right? So that Thursday game and then the Sunday slate of games. So I'm doing this every single week, Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. I want this to be as fun as possible. Make sure you chime in. Tell me what you think about my takes. Make fun of me if you want. I don't care. I just want to have a place where football fans can come together, have a good time, and shoot the shit about football, because that's really what it's all about. So again, thank you again for joining. That's it for me today. This is Bad Takes with Bad Takes in Football, signing out.